Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to do a side-by-side tank comparison for Mythic Plus as a kind of culmination of all the tank guides I've done. As you can see on my handy chart here, we're looking at 4 different categories of comparison. For mobility in Mythic Plus, we really just care about being able to quickly move out of dangerous area of effect mechanics and how quickly we can move from pack to pack. For this category, prop paladins, guardian druids, and death knights are clear losers. Their mobility is enough for Mythic Plus in my opinion. I actually would rate guardian druid dead last in terms of usable mobility outside of stampeding roar, since a lot of their mobility requires them to leave bear form, which is a no-no. All of the tanks do have sufficient enough ways to quickly move from pack to pack and to quickly dodge around mechanics though. Our next category is CC. All we care about here is how many tools the tank brings to help make the dungeon smoother and safer. We don't need enemies chain CC'd for 100 years, we just need to be able to interrupt, displace, and lock groups down enough to kite when needed. In this category, prop paladins, demon hunters, and DKs are the clear losers. Each of these specs have powerful CC options, but many of those options are situational at best and completely unusable at worst. Single target stuns just don't do enough when you're trying to lock down a large pack, and AoE silences, while being great for caster packs, do nothing to help you kite when needed or to displace mobs. Next up, we're looking at group utility, specifically the ways in which a tank can directly support party members with either group damage reductions, B-reses, saves, things like that. In this category, brewmasters and demon hunters are at the very bottom, offering literally nothing in the way of tools to help someone in your group survive or to reduce group damage. Finally, we have survivability. This is self-explanatory. We want to know how much each tank needs to be babysat, where the weaknesses lie in their defensive kit, and what ways they have to keep themselves alive. Brewmasters are again at the bottom here. While every tank will have its weaknesses in their defensive kit, the monk really has no way to immediately stabilize and save itself. They are incredibly dependent on their healer. They have some reasonably strong options for added defensives, but again, even those defensive options requires having a healer or a ton of gear to help stabilize you. Every other tank spec has some last-ditch effort they can make to keep themselves alive without the need of a healer. I would put the prop paladin, demon hunter, and blood DK at the top in this category, assuming that they aren't just outright one-shot, they can find ways to keep themselves alive. Guardian Druids and Prot Warriors also have some strong tools, just not as strong as the other specs at the moment. So, now that we've finished our side-by-side overview, we're going to look at some gameplay footage so we can see these specs in action. I put all 6 tank specs through their paces, just killing trash in Heroic Siege of Borealis. All of these specs are item level 100 to roughly 105 in this footage since I geared them fresh on the PTR. So, we'll start right off with the Guardian Druid. The coming legendaries and covenants will help this spec feel smoother and tankier, as I talked about in my Druid tank video. It does reasonable damage, and it does fairly well at keeping itself up, but as you can see, and we'll start to see as this footage rolls, even with 2 stacks of Iron Fur, I just take so much damage. Bark Skin will offer little solace here, and Frenzied Regen isn't quite enough. This next clip, I'm wanting to show you guys what happens when you try to shapeshift out of bear form for any reason while tanking. Here you can see that I'm going to try to shapeshift out of bear form to get out of one of the roots that these mobs place me in, and this is just such an incredibly bad idea. So even shapeshifting out for just a couple of globals means that I take massive, unrecoverable damage, and I'm just dead. And this is why the Guardian's Toolkit is so misleading. It seems like we have great mobility, lots of utility, loads of off-heals, but the reality is that very little of that can be used while in bear form. Moving on to the DK, being able to mass grip mobs is so incredibly helpful in creating a centralized little death ball for your group to efficiently cleave. We do sufficient damage, although it isn't the highest, but primarily we're incredibly independent with a large arsenal of self-heals and larger defensive cooldowns to help keep ourselves alive. The DK's primary weakness, of course, is its ability to just be one-shot outright. There are ways to help mitigate this by either having your healer give you an external for a large pull, or using one of your larger defensives like Icebound Fortitude for scarier pulls. We can also talent into Purgatory as a kind of poor man's cheat death if we're specifically worried about a dungeon boss or affix one-shotting us. Assuming we survive the initial onslaught of damage, we can usually find ways to live. Our mobility, while far from the best, is sufficient enough in Mythic Plus in my opinion, especially if you talent into Wraithwalk. The added benefit of having Anti-Magic Zone to reduce magic damage for your entire party, and also bringing a B-Res, makes the DK a very strong contender. The Demon Hunter checks a lot of boxes. Great mobility, being able to jump from pack to pack with Infernal Strike. You can even talent into a charge-like ability as well. Their damage is among the highest for tanks, which is always helpful in Mythic Plus. And while they don't have great active mitigation tools, they do have very powerful cooldowns to help stabilize, and they can even talent into an actual cheat death effect with Last Resort. Their CC is very situational, although they can talent into a mass grip effect with Sigil of Chains. My main issue with Demon Hunters is that they just bring zero group support options. The Prot Warrior, of course, is your standard bulwark of defense with seemingly endless ways to reduce incoming damage. Their self-healing is limited to Victory Rush, which requires an enemy to die, so that's a bit of a negative, but really, this is a very solid tank. Great mobility with talent options for more, a great defensive toolkit with talent options for more, passable group support tools with things like Rallying Cry and Intervene, but only one real usable CC in their AoE stun, Shockwave. The issue with Warriors is just their current tuning. We lost a lot with the BFA borrowed powers, and we're not getting enough back in Shadowlands, at least right away. I would expect around Tier 2, maybe, we start seeing more Prot Warriors as they scale very well and they are incredibly stat hungry. On to the Prot Pally. The Paladin has a very well-rounded toolkit with options in each category. Its problem is that it isn't the best in really any category. It does have at least one mobility option with the Cavalier talent, but that still feels pretty garbage. It has some CC with a baseline single target stun and a talent option for an AoE disorient, but those will have limited uses and uptime. Its group support is its greatest strength, but even there, all of its tools are designed to quickly heal or otherwise save one party member at a time. We have no group DR cooldowns outside of our passive devotion aura. The defensive toolkit of the Paladin is similarly situated. Mediocre active mitigation with heavy mastery needed to boost your consecration, and only one reasonably timed DR option in Ardent Defender on a 2-minute cooldown. Our other larger defensives like Guardian, Divine Shield, Lay on Hands, etc. have enormously long cooldowns. The Spec just sits right in the middle of the road. It's not terrible by any means, it's just not quite the best either. Finally, we have the Brewmaster. Our monkey here passively mitigates incoming damage with Stagger, which means we are very unlikely to just be one-shot, which is really our greatest strength. We have very good on-demand mobility with either Chi Torpedo or Tiger's Lust, and we have fantastic CC options in Leg Sweep, our AoE stun, and Ring of Peace, our AoE mob displacement. However, that's where the upsides stop. We have literally zero ways to help our group members stay alive or reduce their damage outside of like literally spamming Vivify on someone, which is just not recommended while tanking. And while we do have some ways to further mitigate damage, smooth out our ticking stagger damage, and even provide some small amounts of self-healing here and there, This is by far the most healer-dependent tank, and unless you are extraordinarily well-geared, you will have a hard time saving yourself, even with your larger CDs, without a healer to help you. So, now that we've looked at each tank's strengths and weaknesses side by side, I'll give my thoughts on which tanks I'm going to start Shadowlands with. As most of you will know by now, I'm a tank main, so I will end up leveling all 6 specs eventually. However, I will be starting with the Blood Death Knight and the Prot Warrior. I've seen enough of the Covenants, Conduits, and Legendaries at this point to feel extremely comfortable with both of these tanks. The Warrior will not be the strongest in the first few weeks of Shadowlands, but the DK will be an incredibly viable option during that time. Once the first raid tier opens up and I can level up Covenant and Conduits as well as upgrade Legendaries on my Warrior though, I think it will start feeling much better. At any rate, as I said, I will be leveling all the tank specs up. These are just the 2 I'm going to start with and will likely devote the most time to. So, let me know in the comments below which tank spec you're going to main. I will have a video coming soon with some general information regarding Covenants and Conduits, but I will wait on making a full guide on those until Blizzard stops tuning them every 4 days. And that wraps up this side-by-side tank comparison. Drop me a like and a sub if you like my content, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!